Hello, this is Lindy. Welcome to Lindy's Magpie Reads. And it's actually Saturday because yesterday I just wasn't feeling up to recording, but today I am raring to go. I'm going to tell you about all the bookish things that I did in the past week, starting with Monday, Lesbian Plus Book Club. We discussed Larissa Lai's Iron Goddess of Mercy, which is a long narrative poem, and I talked to you about it a couple weeks ago. My sweetie read it out loud to me on account of my ongoing concussion-related symptoms, and that turns out to be the ideal way to do it. At book club, all of the other women found that it was pretty tough going. And when I read a portion out loud to them at the meeting, they said, that makes so much more sense. So my suggestion is, if you've been intrigued by this book and want to read it, try reading it out loud. Those of you who have already read it, let me know what you thought of it and how you made out with it. Because I loved it and I plan to reread it, and I think I'm going to get more out of each rereading. It's absolutely marvelous. On Tuesday, I attended a online Calgary Wordfest event. It was the book launch for Heather O'Neill's new book, When We Lost Our Heads. And that just sounds like such a good book and totally outrageous. It's set in 19th century Montreal, and it's about the friendship and hateship of two 12-year-old girls. And I believe it opens with a pistol duel between the two of them, something like that. On Wednesday, it was our monthly literary salon. I'll tell you more about our literary salon events at another Friday Reads. On Thursday, I gave a talk to the Aging with Pride coffee group, and my topic was about a project that I undertook in the mid-1990s, and that was to identify GLBTQ fiction at the public library with rainbow spine labels. Then on Friday, I had a Zoom chat with Roz of Scallydandling About the Books, and we talked about our ongoing graphic novel project. And all week, I've been watching the miniseries based on Station 11. It's called Station 11, the miniseries is, and it's based on the book by Emily St John Mandel. I loved it. And I'm also really looking forward to Emily St John Mandel's newest book. It's not coming out till April, and it's called The Sea of Tranquility. It's going to be science fiction. That's about all I know about it. All right, so on to what I've actually been reading. I'm halfway through The Manningtree Witches by A.K. Blakemore, and I'm wondering if I should bail. The reason I'm wondering is because I'm finding that I am reluctant to go back to it, and the reason is the atmosphere and what's happening in the novel. If you don't know, it is set in the mid-17th century in a village in England, and women are being accused of witchcraft. And they're not treated well. And it's just so horrible that I feel like, I don't know if I want to, put more of that in my head. I already know about the witchcraft trials. I'm not sure if this is going to give me some new insight onto women's powerlessness or taking back of power, perhaps. I don't know where this goes. So those of you who have read it, I'm finished chapter 15, so I think that's about the midpoint. And what do you think? Does it get emotionally easier from this point onward? Let me know if you recommend that I continue or not. I did have another book on witchcraft out from the library, a novel by Brom called Slewfoot. I think that one is set in North America, but at the same time period and with more fantastical elements. The Manningtree Witches has no fantastical elements in it. But because of how I was reacting to the Manningtree Witches, the hold came in for me from the library, and I decided I'm just taking this back. I don't think I'm in the right mind frame for it. So there's that. So what I finished this week, I finished a comic. I finished one adult novel in print format. Finished 4 audiobooks and 2 children's picture books. So I'm going to start with the comic. Oh yeah, that's another thing that I did this past week. On Thursday, I went to Happy Harbour, my local comic book shop, to pick up Saga, issue number 15. It's a floppy. Usually I wait until the trade paperback comes out. You know, we've combined 6 issues. But it's been so long, and I couldn't wait to find out what was next in Saga. And this one is actually a double issue. It's more than 44 pages long. And my favorite character is in it. Where is she? Jolene of the Bookworm Adventure Girl. She had the Atwood Adventure tag, and one of the questions is, who's your favorite comic book character? And mine is Lying Cat, and there's Lying Cat. Woohoo! I was so glad that she was in this issue. And a tip for you, by the way, if you're a Saga fan, Hoopla carries the digital copies. So if your library has a subscription to Hoopla, you can access Saga that way, including issue 55. And then every month, as this continues, you'll be able to read the latest editions. Yes. So, yay. And the print book that I read is Burntcoat. It's a library copy, so it's very shiny. Oh, there we go, Burntcoat. Can you see it? It is small, so it was manageable for me with my vision and cognition and headache problems. Could call it short and sharp or petite and powerful. I'm a huge fan of Sarah Hall. Her language in here is so precise. The voice is detached, you know, the voice of an outsider. The protagonist is an artist, and she works in monumental scale. And the finish that she uses on these wooden sculptures is a Japanese technique of burning to seal the outside. Yes, And this drive to create for her is part of her making sense of the world. She has a big studio where she also lives. I think it's somewhere in the north of England, maybe Scotland. And the name of this studio is called Burntcoat. So that's where the title comes from. She is a person who has to learn to give herself over to love. There is a new romantic relationship in the book, which gets quite erotic and, you know, very much about the body. And that type of writing about sex, is not something that normally appeals to me. However, because I love Sarah Hall's writing so much, I stuck with it, and I am so glad that I did, because, you know, by the end, I was just in awe. I just really, really liked this story about a woman who not only learned to feel fully, but also how to let go. And there is an intensity, like a feverish intensity, and there's also a literal fever, viral fever, because it takes place during a pandemic, a different sort of virus than COVID. But then it's about learning to let go, learning to accept mortality. Totally beautiful. Yeah. In the opening part of this book, we find out that her mother, she and her mother lived together, just the two of them, in quite a remote part of England, and her mother had a severe permanent brain injury. Sorry, the cat really wants to adjust my phone. Sorry about that. And I had a similar reaction, you know, that kind of, I like the writing, but I'm not entirely convinced by the story, with an audiobook novel this past week, and that is Intimacies by KITAMURA. The audiobook is read by Tracy Kato Kiriyama. And the story gradually got right under my skin, in the best possible way. It's about a woman of Chinese heritage who moves from New York City to The Hague to work as an interpreter at the International Court of Justice. And she's living in temporary accommodation. Her job is actually a temporary contract. Her only other close family member is her mother, who's recently moved to Singapore. And she's involved in a new romantic relationship, but this guy still hasn't divorced from his wife, and they're not sure, she's not sure, you know, what's happening with that relationship. She's got yeah. So all of these questions about where does she belong come through very well in the story. It's all very nuanced and gorgeous, just gorgeous. Yeah. Then I read a couple of collections of essays, and both of them are on audiobook. So starting with Orwell's Roses by Rebecca Solnit, and the audiobook is read by the author. There's actually a connection to Intimacies, the novel I just told you about. Because one of the things that SOLNIT talks about is an essay that Lawrence Weschler wrote called Vermeer in Bosnia. And so in that essay, he asked a judge who was presiding over atrocities that were committed in the former Yugoslavia. And, you know, and he said, what did he say? How can you stand to listen to this day after day? And he said that the judge brightened and answered that as often as possible, he made his way to the Mauritshuis Museum that was in the center of town at The Hague, and he would spend time with the Vermeers in intimacies. The Mauritshuis Museum also plays a part. Oh, it's hard to know where to, what to say about Orwell's Roses. I have a commonplace book where I keep track of passages that I enjoy from library books or audiobooks. I'll transcribe passages, and I've got a whole bunch of pages transcribed here. Basically, she's writing about Orwell and his writings, what he had to say about totalitarianism, and she wrote about his love for roses and gardening. She talked about Tina Modotti and her photographs, including a really famous one of roses. And then Modotti went on to have revolutionary activities. She talked about bread and roses. She talked about the dire working conditions for people who are growing roses for the flower industry, the terrible conditions that they're in. She talked about the connections between roses and our appreciation of nature, and how you can't separate that from politics and economics and social justice and class. Yeah, I marked a passage on rereading that I'm going to read to you. Rereading a significant book is like revisiting an old friend. You find out how you've changed when you encounter them again. You see differently because you are different. Some books grow, some wither on reacquaintance. Or, because you're asking different questions, you find different answers. I love Rebecca Solnit. And then the other essays is a collection called These Precious Days by Anne Patchett. And she also wrote about rereading. What did she have to say? I have a note of that. We have to go back because even as the text stays true to the writer's intention, we readers never cease to change. Yes. She had lots of great anecdotes in there. These, the essays in Patchett's book are all of kind of the memoir type, and she wrote about traveling through England in the early 80s when she was a young woman, and she was knitting, but she wasn't a good knitter, and she didn't know how to fix mistakes. So she said whenever she dropped a stitch, she would just go up to the nearest woman who was older than she was and say, you know, I made a mistake, can you help me? And invariably, they were able to. And some people even had the patience to teach her how to fix her mistakes herself. So we're keeping the cat away from there. Come on, you, Frida. So I think my favorite essays in that collection were the one about book covers and how her book covers came to be, and also about being childless by choice. Yeah, there's at least one essay in there about life during COVID-19 pandemic times as well. I also read a memoir in audiobook format by Danielle Geller. She's an archivist, and she teaches writing at, I think, the University of Victoria. Not sure. And like Anne Patchett, Danielle never wanted children. Her story is about overcoming family dysfunction, addictions, poverty. Both of her parents spent probably extended periods of time living homeless, and she and her sister were mostly raised by her paternal grandmother, but in adulthood she actually reconnected with her mother's family, and her mother's family is Navajo. This is an excerpt from the memoir. Our mother was an alcoholic. Our father was an alcoholic. Our grandmother was an alcoholic, 17 years sober. You're an alcoholic, Grandma would tell me, even when I was very young. You just haven't had your first drink. And that was her grandmother on her father's side. So then the last two books are both children's picture books. The Big Bath House. This one is by Kyo McClear with illustrations by Gracie Zhang. And it is based on the author's own experiences of traveling to Japan to spend July and August each year with her grandmother. Kyo McClear had a Japanese mother and a Scottish father, so she's of a mixed ethnicity and did not have a language in common with her grandmother. But what they did share was a love of sweet things and a love of bathing. And so it shows what it's, the bathhouse scenes where there are bodies of all types. And then, there's the one where they're all, after all the getting clean outside of the bath, scrubbing, they're all in the tub, communal bath. All the beautiful bodies. And then, faced flushed, they'll walk home in the cool night air. That nice, peaceful feeling really comes through of what it's like. And in the author's note, she said, because of the bathhouse, I grew up surrounded by naked bodies of all ages, shapes, and sizes. The idea that bodies should always be private and clothed wasn't the norm, and part of my hope with this story is to share and celebrate this other way of being. It's a delight. And another Asian author, this one is Chinese heritage, Andrea Wang, and the book is called Watercress, with the illustrations by Jason Chin. And this one is set in Ohio, which is where Andrea Wang grew up. She based it on her own experiences of feeling so different from the other kids. Not any other Chinese kids in their area, in their town. And an incident where her parents stopped the car because they spotted some watercress growing in the ditch. And they all got out of the car, collected the watercress, and she did not want to eat it. And her parents shared information about what it was like when they were growing up in China, and why wild free food was so precious. There we go. She changed her mind about eating it. Very heartwarming story, done in gorgeous watercolor. Gracie Zhang in the big bathhouse also used watercolor, and both artists used Chinese round brushes to really get the Asian flair to the art as well. So there you have it. Couple of picture books. I am working my way through another collection of essays, Jeanette Winterson's 12 Bites, and you can see my flags. There's lots that's catching my interest there. I'm using it as part of my concussion recovery. So what I do is every morning I read as long as I can in the print format, and I keep track of how long that is until my headache symptoms and dizziness, nausea, confusion, inability to focus, when that increases, then I stop, and then I time how long it takes for my brain to return to the kind of baseline small headache that I'm just living with right now as I recover. So yeah, so that's a little bit of insight on concussion recovery. And that's all I've got to say for now. Thank you so much for watching all the way through to here. And I've got a little video of knitting with my cat to share with you at the end. So thanks again. Let me know if you've read any of these or if you're interested in picking any of these up. I'm always up for reading comments. I love interacting with you. So bye for now.